begin. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We move now to the first of today's Congress panels, which focuses upon the timely topic high on the agenda of governments, nations, and companies, the energy transition and the importance of our industry just thinking behind or beyond tomorrow. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our moderator, Dr. Thomas O'Donnell, Hertie School of Governance in Berlin, and an energy and an international affairs analyst who will introduce the session and our panelists. If you need, please get your headphones because we will have some presentations in Ukrainian, as I understand. Dr. O'Donnell, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Well, good morning. It's an honor to do this. Let me first off introduce what we're going to be talking about, and then I'll introduce the members of the panel. Our panel is entitled Thinking Beyond Tomorrow, the Energy Transition. So the idea here is that with the growing urgency of dealing with climate matters, there's the questions of how companies and countries are going to deal with this. What does this mean, this agenda? What does this mean for Ukraine? How does it compare? How does Ukraine compare to other countries? You know, how do the companies in Ukraine compare to companies elsewhere? What do they need to do? In the energy sector, the question of reform has, of course, been a very important question for Ukraine, and that remains central to also to not just the question of reform of the energy sector governance itself, but also for a sustainable energy transition, and also how Ukraine places itself in the European energy ecosphere, you could say. At the same time, there's the question of transparent financing mechanisms that come with this, and the necessity in Ukraine for modern management, which we've been hearing about today, and new know-how, technical know-how. And this is all key to redesigning the energy infrastructure, unlocking access to low-carbon technologies, and having a transition roadmap for the country. And also attracting new businesses, which may also include the new things like CO2 storage, hydrogen processing, and transport, and so forth. So, without further ado, let me move forward here. Thorsten Vuret is Minister Counselor of Energy and the EU delegation to Ukraine. I believe he's not yet online. He'll be joining us online shortly. Next, if I could ask Olga Bielkova, Director, to come up. Olga is Director on Government and International Affairs for the Gas Transit System Operator here in Ukraine. And welcome. And Alexei Ryabchin. Alexei is the advisor to the chair of the board of Naftogaz of Ukraine. Welcome. We also have Steve Freeman. Steve is head of energy transition, digital, and integration issues at Schlumberger. And of course, we also have Dr. James Watson. James is the Secretary General of Eurogas, and myself. So I would just make, well, you know, I'll just make a quick comment, a couple comments just before I sit down and our panelists make some comments. And that is this question of course, when we talk about the obligation to deal with climate change, there's a great tension between people who've done business in the old way and want to move forward. And I would just make an observation that I always make to my students, and probably you've heard this before. There's a triad of things. On the one hand, there's environmental questions, which are very important. Depending on who you talk to, it might be the most important question in the world. But there's also this question of the affordability and cost. If you talk to ordinary folks, that's a social justice issue. You know, can I afford heat? If you talk to companies, it's, you know, can I make a profit? And then the last thing is security. Not only security of whether energy is delivered, but also we're in Ukraine. It's a question of national security. So you've got these three things. If you talk to countries from Germany on the one hand to maybe Poland on the other in the EU, you're going to have see a huge difference in the balance of those three things. And it's not, we can moralize about it, but underneath there are real dependencies, real interests of the different countries that have to be respected. There's a big fight in the EU right now over the green finance taxonomy. This is where partially this is taking place now. And Ukraine, of course, is sitting here, is related to all this, is part of all this. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our experts, our wonderful experts today. Olga, would you, I'm not sure if I'm started.
Do you
Would
want
like
to specify a question to me or?
No, what I was going to ask each of you to do is to spend about 2 or 3 minutes. I was going to ask each one of you in order. I believe Thorsten is not here yet. So, Thorsten is here.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Why don't we start with Thorsten then? Thorsten, welcome.
Yeah, good morning.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry I cannot be with you. I plan to be in Kyiv, but I can only return tomorrow. So my name is Thorsten Willert. I'm the Energy Counselor at the EU Delegation. And I have been following gas issues with Ukraine and in the wider region for quite some time. And what I find really encouraging is that we are now discussing the full triangle or the magic triangle of gas in Ukraine at a very prominent place. Whereas still a couple of years ago, essentially it was only the question of affordability and security. So we are now really part in Ukraine of this wider European discussion. And I'm very glad that we can do this. And I'm also very glad that we have Eurogas involved, and all the, let's say, the brains of Europe are involved in discussion with Ukraine and on Ukraine. And we have done quite a lot of progress on energy security, on gas security for Ukraine. All of you know about this. We see now that there are major questions about affordability, especially now when the gas prices are very, very high, and the functioning of the markets shows that still probably some rules need to be improved, because what we see now is a lot of instability in the market and the prices, so this is not how it should be. And that we are now also discussing for Ukraine, which has this huge renewable energy potential and huge savings potential, how this can be used to go also in the third dimension of gas. Do you hear me? Because I have a frozen picture. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Thorsten. And with that,
okay.
Olga, please.
Oh.
Is it?
I don't know about others in the room, but we had weird sound for
it's
some of
difficult.
us. Yes.
It's all distorted for us up here. It's difficult to us to understand Thorsten and each other.
Yeah, but let me just say I'm extremely happy to be here today, and I find myself once again talking about something which is potential for Ukraine. But in my tenure as a politician, I came to this conclusion that for any potential to become a reality, you actually have to be very honest with the preconditions of how to transform any potential. For this panel, it would be transition to decarbonized sources of energy into this reality. And I came up with some conclusions, which I'm about to start with, because I think it is important for us to understand where we are right now. Thorsten said we are in crisis, not only us, but Europe as well. I would say the whole world is, catching a grasp with the pricing on natural gas. But in this particular country, we do have dimension of energy security, military security, and affordability for population when it comes to any source of energy. But if we really want to make transition between where we are right now and where we want to be, considering the climate change, we need to understand the role of natural gas. For this country and for Europe, I submit to you my opinion, gas is a pivotal precondition for any decarbonization to happen. My second conclusion would be that Ukraine should not, and natural gas, and our whole issues around natural gas in Ukraine, it should not be positioned as a victim, as a problem. It should be positioned as a solution to some of the major challenges each and every country, and my country in particular, will face throughout this decarbonization path. And third, and very important for our international guests and our international partners, when we look at whole Europe, it's very diverse. And we as a country, we sustained some parallel challenges, be it Nord Stream, Turk Stream. We oppose it for a variety of reasons. But my company, gas transmission system operator, yesterday submitted our application to a German energy regulator, where we want to take part in this discussion. And one of our interests is exactly that we think that we will not be able to do the transition between where we are right now and to decarbonized system of energy in Ukraine we want to be, if this project, Nord Stream 2, will be certified under the model which they submitted their application. I think it is important for us to understand, we may dream about complete replacement of natural gas right now or in 5 years, but it's not realistic. In this country, we do have cold winter, we do have population using it for heating, we do have a lot of export-oriented industries using it for their production, so we cannot just be completely out of reality and dream of something which will replace natural gas, specifically in heating. However, there are ways of how do we approach decarbonization in a strategic and affordable manner. And let's take biomethane for now. Today, Ukrainian Parliament will be considering one of the major key bills which will allow my company and many companies in this country to benefit from a gradual introduction of biomethane right now, without any major changes of the existing infrastructure. At the very same time, my company will be able to combine the decarbonized gas with our duty as of today to the people of Ukraine and to our transit obligations under the current transit agreement. There are plenty of other ways, but I think I've used my time. Yes?
Well, you're certainly going to have more.
Yeah.
Okay. Please.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm definitely honored to be in this distinguished panel and to discuss the energy transition in a gas forum. I guess the reason why we are opening the second day is that this is a vital topic, which is one of the biggest in a discussion in regard to the business opportunities. Because as Olga mentioned, biomass, hydrogen, energy efficiency, renewable carbon capture storage is the future investment. And often in the couloirs, our colleague, our gas and fossil fuel colleague, jealous to the green and transition people that you are getting all of the attention currently. But I'm completely agree with Olga, who gave the general overview of the situation in Ukraine, that green transformation and all of these issues are vital and super topical. And today, Verkhovna Rada will adopt not only the biomethane law, which we are also very supportive, but also it will adopt the energy efficiency directive, which we're about to do as our European integration. So our parliament, our legislative body, our government is also very committed towards the climate goals. But what I'd like to say that in Naftogaz, we completely understand that the current agenda is to extract more gas and to ship the gas to provide the gas for the shipment to the customers and to go well with the heating season. So this is a vital agenda, and all 85% of the efforts go there, and 5% of the efforts is the energy transformation. And and I truly believe that in 10 years it will be 40 to 60. And 20 years it will be 70 to 30. The green agenda will be lead. But currently, I completely agree with Olga. We need to have the security of supply. We need to understand what will be the decision regarding our transmission system, gas contracts, etc., etc., etc. But if I have a couple of minutes just to say about the green transformation, I will use them for the awareness raising of the distinguished colleagues who sits here and who looks us through the YouTube. I would like to speak about the scopes, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Currently, these are the words that is not really relevant to the majority of the gas industry in Ukraine yet, but this is the most topical and the most hot issue all over the world. So all the companies, not only the nations declare the climate neutrality till 2050, but also the company, the oil and gas company, all the majors declare these goals according to scopes. What are these scopes? So basically, you need to reduce the CO2 emission, but how? Like how you calculate them? There are 3 scopes, and like the first is like more or less simple. Let's put it that way. They're all hard, but like more or less it's feasible. First scope is your direct emission from your operation. So basically, it's like methane, flaring, routine operation, and Naftogaz aim to do the 100% reduction of our emission to the scope 1 till 2040. This is the goal that was set in February this year. We discussing this with different companies, how you can help Naftogaz not to emit methane, but to stay in our gas transmission system for our distinguished operator to ship it to our customers. Second scope is also more or less clear. It's the energy that you use for your own process. So basically, all the companies are trying to shift to more renewables. Ukraine, we are in favorable position because we have like 50% of our energy mix is nuclear, around 15% is like green energy, the rest is coal and gas, and I guess it will be somehow removed. So like more or less clear the pathway through the 2040. You just need to install more renewable and use it for your own operation. And we are in Naftogaz, as our CEO Yuri Vitrenko yesterday told, that we aim to have some kind of a 1 gigawatt of energy till 2030 to use it for our own consumption, to use it for the market purpose, and of course for the hydrogen, which is a business product. And the scope 3 is the most difficult stuff, like the most difficult stuff. And yet we're thinking Naftogaz, like how to deal with the scope 3, and everybody in the world is dealing with the scope 3. So basically, these are the emission from our own product to our consumer. So basically, when companies set a goal till 2050 that they will be climate neutral till 2050, it means that they are like either minimizing or they refuse to be in the gas and oil business, or they will use the carbon capture storage to provide the fossil fuel to its end consumer. It's cost a lot currently in 2021, but if we think that it's only 30 years left for this kind of a decarbonization process, and that all the top countries and all the countries that are close to Europe, that are dealing with Europe, will be forced to do this, and we see this in our relationship with the IFIs and with our client. This is like one of the biggest challenges that we need to think exactly right now. So this is a big challenge, to extract more, to do the winter season, and to think how we will proceed further with the industry.
Thank you, Liz. Now I'd like to move on to Steve from Schlumberger and see your perspective.
Yeah, no, very good. No, thank you very much. It's great to be here today. So my purview is kind of like global energy transition in Schlumberger. So kind of I get the great opportunity to be able to look at these things from many different environments. And I think there's some fantastic and exciting opportunities in Ukraine to be able to really leverage. To the previous point around scope 1, 2, and 3, absolutely all companies, all countries need to be focused on that. Schlumberger recently announced that we were the net zero for 2050 for scopes 1, 2, and 3. So we're the first service company to announce that. But you can't just have 2050 goals, you need to have near-term goals as well. So 30% reduction in scope 1 and 2 by 2025 and a 50% reduction by 2030. So we are standing up to the plate to be able to reduce our emissions, but a large proportion of our business and most of my focus is working with governments and countries and organizations around the world to work out how you can decarbonize effectively, how you can put a pathway towards energy transition. And we're doing this. We've done several hundred projects with different customers in different parts of the world in that space. And typically we talk about kind of emissions reduction from oil and gas operations, how you design out emissions. We talk about carbon capture and storage, and we talk about scaling up low carbon energy in many forms like hydrogen that's been discussed. one of the key things really, if you want to get kind of investment anywhere in the world these days, is to be able to demonstrate that you've got credible ESG potential and you've got a clear path towards the energy transition. Okay, so it's around establishing, how do you reduce your emissions from your oil and gas facilities, looking at methane emissions, looking at energy efficiency, then looking at how can you actually create a more valuable product from what you already have. So potentially moving natural gas to blue hydrogen, and the world wants blue hydrogen. The world also wants to remove CO2. So again, there's a valuable potential resource there that you could potentially store CO2 for other people and generate a new revenue stream for the country in that particular space. And I think biofuels also is really key in this particular place. You can potentially generate negative emissions technologies, which allows you to potentially get revenues from other regions that need to be able to decarbonize. So I think Ukraine has an interesting opportunity with its large underground gas storage, its pipeline infrastructure, its biofuel system, its natural gas resources. I think all of those key pieces can come together to provide a clear opportunity to drive an energy transition pathway that should unlock investment from a global community.
Right. Well said, Steve. Okay. And I'd like to go to James. And James won't be able to stay the whole time, so I want to make sure to get him in. It's sort of like, I remember during energy crisis, everybody wanted to hear what the Secretary General of OPEC had to say. Well, we have the Secretary General of Eurogas.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the nice introduction as well, Tom. I think there may be some difficulties with hearing us online, so I'll speak slowly and not be too long. First of all, I really want to thank the organisers for inviting me today. It's a great pleasure to be here. And of course, we're very happy to continue our good work with Naftogaz, a good member of our organisation here in Eurogas. I think that we can say very clearly that we see Ukraine as an important energy partner for Europe. And we really must not forget the importance that natural gas plays today in the European Union, but also in Ukraine, in terms of delivering increased carbon reductions as natural gas replaces coal and oil in power and in heating and in many other parts of the economy. And increasingly in transport, it seems, through the Fit for 55 package. So there's still many options for natural gas, but natural gas is still a transition fuel. I'm sure that my colleague from the European Commission would agree with that statement. We understand in Eurogas that by 2050, there can be no unabated emissions from natural gas. That means that the European Union and the Ukraine must look at what the future holds. We, in our study in 2020, well, just last year, forecast that by 2050, natural gas consumption in Europe will decline by around 35%. This means that we need other alternatives. We will need other fuels, and we'll need to focus on the development of them. Now, Ukraine is blessed, firstly because you have large space, but also you have very good weather conditions. We would see in Europe a growing increase in things like hydrogen, the development of hydrogen, and the possibility to export hydrogen, maybe in the form even of ammonia, to the European Union should not be missed by the Ukrainians. Because as we decline our use of natural gas, we shall significantly increase our consumption of hydrogen. The European Commission has a strategy where they have asked for 40 gigawatts of electrolyzers, which produce renewable hydrogen, to be deployed in the European Union by 2030, but 40 gigawatts should also be deployed in the European neighbourhood region. Now that's North Africa and the Middle East, but also Ukraine. It's a huge opportunity. Ukraine has the ability to deploy much renewable electricity, and for sure, you will not always be able to use all of the electricity that is produced by renewables, because during very windy periods or very sunny periods, you cannot. Turning it into green hydrogen and sending it to the European Union is a great idea. There will also be the opportunity, of course, to send low-carbon hydrogen that's produced from natural gas using CCS or through pyrolysis. This is also an opportunity that Ukraine will have to look at. And finally, I will touch on biomethane. I read a report, it's perhaps a little bit old now, 2019, that was produced on the biomethane potential of many countries, but it included Ukraine. And it was saying that you could get to about 10 BCM, billion cubic meters of biomethane could be produced sustainably, which means second generation feedstocks. And in the end, 10 billion cubic meters is quite a lot of biomethane. And biomethane could be utilized either within the Ukraine to help decarbonize its own energy consumption, or alternatively, it could be sold as a premium product to the European Union, which will also be grateful for a low carbon or a zero carbon fuel. This is the direction that we see Europe going in. Net zero is an absolute guaranteed direction. There is going to be no rowing back from that. The European Union will go to net zero in 2050. So for us in Europe, for you in Ukraine, we have to plan together. We have to make sure that we produce the right products to help us achieve our climate objectives. And I think it was good, actually, the gentleman from Schlumberger also mentioned carbon capture and storage. Our study also makes it very clear we will not be able to get to net zero without utilizing carbon capture and storage. And so I think this is also an opportunity where your very important industries and our industries could work together to develop the mechanisms to use and utilize carbon capture and storage. Thank you very much, Tom. I pass back to you, and I hope you could hear me okay.
Yes, we could hear you quite well. If you have a minute for some questions, I'll start with you, James. So let's look at it this way. Here we have a company who perhaps can do the things you're talking about. You're saying the Germans and everybody in the EU would like green hydrogen from here. Well, the fact of the matter is, if they can produce it and there's going to be a market, you can make it's like the oil and gas sector. If you know there's going to be a 20, 25-year demand, and you know it's going to be, why not? Whatever the customer wants. So usually the question gets posed the other way. Is Ukraine reliable? And I would like to ask you, is the EU reliable? We know there's a fight taking place right now over the green finance taxonomy. You know, I'm a nuclear physicist, so I have to mention that. And we know that the scientific people, the joint research, people at the commission said there's no problem. It's about as dangerous as, if I remember the words, about as dangerous as offshore wind. And so now the commission's kind of stuck. The new German government is coming and they don't dare talk about it. Okay. Number two, we have the question of more relevant today, we have the question of natural gas. Is it a transition fuel? And even if they accept it as a transition fuel, how many little tags will be put on it, when it comes to investing in it? Now, I don't want to be a naysayer, but I remember going through all this over ethanol. Then I remember, then I said, no, there's going to be cellulosic ethanol, and that's going to be great. Anyway, now the EU is trying to, anyway, it's gone. There was, what else? There was hydrogen fuel cells 20 years ago. That didn't work. I talked to people, let's say at places like the IEA, and I said, we looked into this in physics 20 years ago, and this hydrogen didn't make any sense for a lot of reasons. And people will say, no, we're talking about offshore stranded wind, that you could make hydrogen for specific applications. You can't use it for anything else. It makes no thermodynamic sense, not to mention money, to put it into a heat engine after what you've done. And anyway, I could go on with a list of things. There's drivable cars. And in Germany, the Bundestag's 8th energy monitor, the independent monitors came back and said it will not be possible in Germany to have 100% renewables and no nuclear. We have to export these to other places and bring the carbon credits back home. So is the EU going to be reliable for Ukraine if we go ahead with this?
Well, I'm going to I'll answer.
I went on a bit.
I'm going to answer the Torsten then. There's the European Commission here, and I as an industrial lobbyist, if you will still give the answer that I think Torsten will be happy to hear. The answer is yes. The European Union is a reliable partner. We're setting up a very ambitious policy framework here, actually with great support from Eurogas. We understand the direction that needs to be going in, because we are facing the climate challenge. We have to deal with the climate, and that's reality. We can't escape from it. Now, natural gas will be important in the meantime. We do know that, and the European Commission also know it. Now, you mentioned the taxonomy. Taxonomy is an interesting piece of work. The first Delegated Act is extremely favourable to hydrogen and to biomethane. It's extremely favourable. In fact, we've got no axe to grind with the Delegated Act in relation to those things. And the infrastructure needs. It's all covered. So, in fact, it's highly sustainable for the private finance sector to invest in carbon capture and storage, in biomethane, in hydrogen production, electrolyzers, pyrolysis. These are all covered under the first Delegated Act. Now, the issue came about natural gas and how you would actually count that as being sustainable. The European Commission made the decision to take natural gas out and treat it as a transition fuel, and then produce a secondary Delegated Act. Now, we are very hopeful when the European Commission do that, they understand that a transition fuel doesn't meet 100 grams of CO2 today. It's just not possible for gas to do that. You can't. We don't have the technology that's in the ground, i.e. CCS today, to just simply do that. So we've always spoken about having natural gas in this separate act, but basically being treated in a way that recognizes transition means a reduction over time of the CO2 emissions. So a declining threshold, we call it, of CO2 emissions over time, which would show basically the transitional nature of natural gas. Now, what I say about the European Union, the European Commission, is very clear. When we set the rules, we stick by them. In fact, the European Union is considered a great exporter of many things, but it's a #1 exporter of rules. And I think that there's no doubt that when we see today in the Renewable Energy Directive targets for essentially what is hydrogen, green hydrogen, of course, it's the Renewable Energy Directive, there are targets for renewable hydrogen to be in place in industry, in transport by 2030. I don't think there's going to be a U-turn. I know, Tom, you mentioned the whole thing about biofuels and ethanol you mentioned before. Of course, they had to look at sustainability criteria. Well, sustainability criteria are now set. So it's not a question of saying, I'm going to rewrite all of the book and say, this isn't sustainable anymore. We look at wastes, we look at second generation, we look at advanced biofuels. And the gentleman from Schlumberger also mentioned biofuels. So the way that I would see it is, look at what's happening, look at the framework that's being created, and make sure that you're adhering to that level. And that applies to Ukraine. Whilst Ukraine is not a member of the European Union, if you can provide biomethane or green hydrogen and meets the standards that are set by the European Union, then you will be absolutely welcome to trade, no longer as a transit company, but a producer in your own right of fuel that we want. And that's important for Ukraine. I certainly mentioned this to Naftogaz when we see them. I'm sure they're very familiar with my patter. But this is how we see it. This is the future. And I see no reason to doubt the strength of partnership between the EU and the Ukraine and the strength of the rules, which we will abide by. Anyway, Torsten might want to say something on that. So Torsten, please feel free to contradict or support. I don't mind. That's how I would see it.
Thank you very much, James. Let's see. Maybe I just throw you one more question, okay? I think Olga mentioned this earlier. We really have this problem for the transition in the East, in the Central and Eastern European countries or the 3 Seas region, depending on how you want to look at it. There's a lot of coal. And it's really hard to see how you're going to get away from coal except by going to natural gas. And I have to say, I think it's not quite right if you go to a place like Poland, where outside the large cities, people are dying, and they're not dying from climate change, they're dying from pollution from dirty, wet coal that they burn in their houses. So this should be given some weight too. Natural gas doesn't produce anything like that. So if there's a way to build all the north-south infrastructure that needs to be built, again, this has to be 30-year projects at least. And it not only is energy security, we know where that natural gas comes from, we know who's building the pipelines right now through Turkstream, all in the south. Actually, the pipelines have already been built across Germany. The main builder of pipelines in Europe is Gazprom and partners. These countries need security, but they also need to get away from coal to save lives and for climate reasons. The problem I see here is that, okay, gas is a transition. I mean, that's true long run. But even in the process, somehow gas is hit and made difficult. You're made to feel guilty, but not only guilty, the standards that you might apply to the United States or the Germany or maybe England, if you apply those standards there, you can't get the investors really. And this is a real problem. Our friend from the World Bank the other day said, no, we're not investing upstream. Try and tell that to those countries. I mean, what can we do about this sort of thing? How do you get around this, or do you?
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Tom, is true, absolutely right. Especially in places that are depending on coal at the moment. I mean, especially coal in heating, which people often overlook. Everyone thinks about just coal in power. But in general, you're seeing actually a lot of housing in Central and Eastern Europe that is dependent on coal. It's extremely unhealthy and very, very bad for the environment. And natural gas is important in its means to actually replace that at usually a very affordable level for those customers. I think we are seeing in places like Poland and Greece and other countries, Romania, large build-outs of the distribution grid for natural gas, and people are being connected to it because ultimately it is a much cleaner source of fuel. And that is a very important element that those countries take into consideration. Now, in terms of the pipes, you said there's also LNG infrastructure. And actually, the European Commission and the European Union have been very successful in promoting an LNG strategy so that we are indeed strongly diversifying our supply possibilities. Of course, the price is very high today, and I'm sure we will talk about that, but that is a relatively unusual situation that we find ourselves in. But you look, terminals are being built in Greece, they're being built in Croatia, they're being built in Poland, they already exist in places like Lithuania. I believe that we already have a very robust set of infrastructure that allows diversity, which allows security of supply, which means that we are able to help countries still essentially decarbonize using natural gas. Now, if you look at the new regulation that's coming out from, say, the Trans-European Network for Energy, where they're saying you cannot just invest purely in natural gas infrastructure. It must be infrastructure that can also be repurposed for hydrogen. In Eurogas, we would agree. We think that we already have a very strong, in fact, our natural gas infrastructure is virtually complete. There are very small parts that are missing that can be built still under the previous projects of common interest programs. So we recognize that, and we think those should be allowed to be completed. And the European Commission aren't arguing with us, and neither are the member states. Now, we think that you go on the next level and say, when you're going to build new infrastructure that relates to gaseous fuels, it must be compliant with hydrogen, because that is what the future of those grids are. Don't build stranded assets, build assets that are for the future, future-proof. So those are still allowed to be built. It's what I was saying also about the actual taxonomy. You can say things are anti-gas if you want. In Eurogas, we will say, as long as there's a proper, credible approach. It's also reflected, by the way, in the European Commission state aid guidelines, at least the draft that was circulated for consultation. There's still a recognition that natural gas will play a role, and the state aid guidelines said you can invest as a member state in natural gas as long as you have a credible pathway for the decarbonisation of the gaseous fuel source, which is exactly what we in Eurogas are talking about. We are saying you must have natural gas today, but at the same time, countries must plan to decarbonise it. So I don't see that there's a freeze on finance for natural gas. It's more nuanced in the way that you have to access the finance. And you can't just do blindly build. Right. You must build with the future in mind. And that's smart.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, James. Thanks. Well, essentially, I'd like to throw the same questions at our panel. Olga, is the EU a reliable partner? But I'm being, not being disrespectful to the EU, but
on behalf of Ukrainian company, I can tell that we had a very constructive and wonderful cooperation with Europe for the last 30 years. Ukrainian TSO, gas TSO, for that matter, is extremely proud to be transporting natural gas to Europe and to be a very reliable partner. But of course, as we approach any partnership, we have to sit down and exchange our interests. And we do understand that Europe has an interest in decarbonizing. But Ukraine also has some interests. And let me explain you our interests and our concerns today once again. We are a country consuming 30 BCM of gas, 20 of which we produce. The gas is 10 has to be imported. So the TSO, which I represent today, we have a duty of delivering gas to countries. That's, one side of my equation. So I cannot ignore the need of my own country to, the need for natural gas. Then second important issue, natural gas is not only used to produce electricity. By the way, in Ukraine, it's, it's virtually produced with the help of natural gas. In this country, it's used for heating, for industry. And, so far, not so many other resources are replacing natural gas for this very, vivid needs of Ukraine there. So this is my second interest, to have a resource which is sustaining our economy and the needs of people. And then third, Ukraine is extremely interested in finding its own very nice spot, let's say, under the sun of decarbonization. But it means that our needs have to be included. So whenever I get a representative from some of the German companies saying, Olga, forget about natural gas. Let's talk about pure hydrogen, which is needed in EU. It sounds a bit, I don't want to use the bad word colonial, but it does actually sound a bit colonial, because my country needs natural gas. So how do we find a way how to combine the beautiful idea of hydrogen even today? But then the funding comes in place. Ukrainian TSO is going under tremendous modernization right now. And of course, we want to install only stations which are hydrogen ready. But there is an issue of cost, and who is going to be paying for it? Can I ask my own citizens to include it into the tariff, the extra premium cost of capex for hydrogen today, when I don't have guarantees of somebody for the next 20 years? And I can tell you, the price may vary something between 10% and 100%. Are we ready to pay today extra premium without knowing that we have full-fledged guarantees? I don't know if it's, any prudent TSO should be very strict about, cross-subsidizing, about explaining all the tariff components to all the existing clients, because it will eventually play out for future. But I am extremely in favor of doing some pilot projects about hydrogen, about biomethane. But when they are not crossing out the needs which are currently existing. And we actually have a very enthusiastic, colleague of mine, Director Pavel Stanchik, who will be reporting on our plans for hydrogen. But I just want to make sure that we all understand that there are current needs, we need to include them. There are also transitionary period, and we need to strengthen our ability to report to the stakeholders that we are doing everything possible to minimize the negative impact of using natural gas today, but we cannot bash natural gas. We cannot stop funding the infrastructure, because it will be needed in future for decarbonized gases. And if we stop all the funding, especially through EU, how do we deliver on many decarbonization plans of, let's say, Poland, Moldova, Hungary? Torsten, we had, a variety of talks with you just in the recent days. Moldova is in crisis right now, not asking for biomethane, not asking for hydrogen. They are asking for natural gas. That's reality.
Well, from Olga, we get the insights of the transmission operator. Maybe as an advisor to Naftogaz, we could get similar your reflections on this.
We are completely agreed and aligned with our partners from TSO. So definitely.
But unbundled.
Unbundled TSO, as I said, partners. We together with Olga, we voted all the laws that required for us, and we also do hope that Europe will be dealing according to its own laws and principle in regard to the Nord Stream, because it won't be definitely the question that our honorable moderator said about trust in Europe and whether Europe is a reliable partner. But it's a very challenging time for Ukraine, as you understand, that we need to do both things simultaneously, do the market transition economy, do the international challenge in regard to the energy crisis, and to decarbonize. All the European countries, all the European member states did the market reform, 30 years ago, build a properly or more or less properly functioned market. Then they started to decarbonize. We are doing this simultaneously. It's not only costly, but it's also require a lot of intellectual and human resources to do it the right way. And I put the statement that way, that we are either at the table or on the menu of this green transformation. Everything relies on us, because we have a lot of low-hanging fruit in the energy transition, like energy efficiency. We are one of the most energy inefficient nations in the world. And just to invest into the energy efficiency, thermal modernization, our pipelines, industry, it will save huge amount of billion cubic meters that our respective operator needs to transport from somewhere. Same with the biomethane, biogas. Yeah, definitely we are a country blessed with the great agriculture industry. And to do all of this backward and forward linkages together with the recycling, together with the waste management, together with the building this plant and building a proper regulation will also give us an additional surplus. For us to be in 10 or 5 or 10 years, we could be the energy independent in regard to the energy import. And this is a goal of Naftogaz. And it's not only about the national security, it's also about profit. It's a business. Definitely, energy efficiency is a market and it will be profitable. Biogas, biomethane, it is a business, it will be profitable. Hydrogen, I will not steal the conversation from the next panel, but definitely Naftogaz has an ambition to become the biggest hydrogen producer in Ukraine. Or blue hydrogen or low carbon hydrogen, like Europe needs to understand what does it need and to set the right taxonomy and right incentive, because nobody is yet understand whether it will be compensation for the off-taker, whether it will be compensation for the transit, whether it will be compensation for the production. So like how to build the economy of scale, how to decrease the cost of the hydrogen. Definitely we are in this business. We are looking, we're doing partners, but like it's not yet there. So Naftogaz, and yesterday we had the slide, requires around like 10 to 15 billion euros in 10 years to do the green transformation. Our country, which set the first time a very ambitious goal according to the NDC, National Determined Contribution to the Climate Change, set the target of 65%, and this is like very ambitious target, which required 100 billion euros of investment. And if, like, very last remark to the taxonomy of the European Union, we have problem with the taxonomy because Europe is saying we will not invest to the companies that will extract more oil, that will do no methane or like etc. etc. So it's really quite a challenging period. We are at the table or on the menu, but I'm very optimistic in regard to the opportunities that is here in regard to our green transformation.
So, look, I don't know. This is to me. This is a strange day or a strange week. Yeah, I have to say. If I go to another meeting, it's like, I say it not too colorfully. Oh my gosh, Europe doesn't have enough gas in storage. If the wind doesn't blow again, we're going to need more gas. And if it's extra cold again, and then if there's an extra warm heating season, whenever, somewhere, cooling season, somewhere along there, you either run out or it happens like, when OPEC gets within 2 million barrels of extra, the market goes crazy. It's not linear anymore, and that's what we're in right now here. And it's not just Europe, it's a world crisis. Here's a country that has huge amount of storage. Of course, the biggest supplier in Eurasia doesn't want to send it here. I understand today they're 97% full, is my information, so they're going to have to send it somewhere, and probably through Yamal, but at least maybe something will go to Europe. Ukraine can be like the van der Leyen is talking about. I mean, I wrote an op-ed about this last year. Ukraine is a central bank of energy. You can do the storage, right? You could play the same role that the SPRs play in the oil sector. Everybody has a mandate. You have to put so much underground. There's a committee that decides when to release it and how to release it. They could store it in Ukraine and also in their own countries. And then you could deal with a situation like this because you really can't control the global forces that create these situations. So on one hand, you expect, you're talking to the gas people, it's like the oil war last year in OPEC. Everyone's going to talk about how do we deal with this. But at the same time, you've got this other moral imperative, but actually real imperative. We also don't want to be polluting in 2050 or something like this. Now, oftentimes they ask companies, and this is what we've been talking about, how can the companies and the state show its goodwill that it's got a path to get there and really have the time to solve these problems? When you ask your companies in other places, Latin America or here, if you ask your energy producer, we want to have some social tasks for you. You're going to have to distribute energy somehow cheaper. Okay, that's energy. Other countries I've been in, the president of the country told me, you're going to have to distribute food. You're going to have to help with, finally it was elections. But anyway, but the problem is, who's the competent organization that's made the changes, it's the gas company or these state companies oftentimes, and they get dragged in. But here we're asking them to do another thing, to make this transition. That's also not really their traditional business. Should we be asking these companies to do this? Or is it the fact that if you look at Ukraine, you've got 46% of your electricity from nuclear? Let you guys do your business and let somebody else do this? Or what? I mean, is there another... you guys deal with this all over the world. Is this wise, this combination? How can this be? I mean, because you literally have the executives, their minds in two places at once. There's a gas...
I mean, it's an interesting challenge that we've got. With an interesting challenge that we've got multiple different factors coordinating at the same point, creating somewhat of a lock in the energy industry. I think in terms of decarbonisation, that is a collective responsibility for society, for all industries, for all countries.
Absolutely.
And I think it's clear that decarbonisation is a way to drive financial benefit. So the companies and the countries that can offer decarbonisation capabilities have the ability to be able to drive revenues. And so, but at the same time, that decarbonisation strategy, which is going to partly relate to your previous point, also has to be at the right pace for the right country. There are different challenges from geography and from economics that mean that you can't just copy and paste a strategy from one block into another block. But I think what we do need to look at is also the opportunities. So hydrogen might not be the right solution to decarbonize the gas grid for Ukraine, but it might be the right solution in the near term to add a valuable product that you could sell to the EU, that are willing to pay more money for that particular resource, which you can then use to decarbonize your own economy in different ways. Now, there are also different kind of levers that need to be taken into account. Again, as you say, many of these things coming together at the same point. If you're looking at things like the potential kind of carbon border adjustment mechanism coming in, if steel producers, for instance, want to be able to export into Europe, then
that's right.
Using hydrogen to potentially decarbonize some of those industrial use cases is a way that, again, you can stimulate the economies in your country as well as be able to kind of generate new revenues from additional countries. So I think that it's a complicated problem. It can't be one size fits all. It has to be fit for purpose for the society and the economy that it's being applied in.
If we could do it a little bit like speed dating or speed, let's just, so we can go around a few times. I'd really like to hear repeatedly from people.
Yeah, I think what they taught us in public policy is that issues like decarbonization of such magnitude, you have to have constant dialogue between all the stakeholders, specifically with the people of the country. For this idea to be perceived, to be accepted, you need to have buy-in of the people, that they do understand the value of decarbonization, and they see those jobs created for them, and they see those energy sources being created, new energy sources being created and being at their disposal. And then I can do my job. I can advocate for, new programs, for new political decisions to be made to change regulations, but it has to be a constant dialogue. And I don't think you can impose the idea of complete change overnight without consulting with the people. This is what I believe in.
Yes.
And sometimes I have this feeling when I talk to my European colleagues, sometimes they do not consult with us and our reality. And once again, reality is completely different in Ukraine than, let's say, in Great Britain or Norway or Denmark, which I'm amazed by their progress. But we are not yet there, and we need EU partners to understand our reality as well.
Please. Look.
Yeah, very quickly, I completely agree with Olga as usual, but like Ukraine is very rich, and God bless, not only with the big land we can produce renewable sources, but also with gas. And we have to extract this gas, and we have the the privilege of 10+ years more to have this gas extracted, and this is like due to Mavriki Kalugin and our other colleagues from UGIC to extract more gas, and the revenue of this gas should be a source of the decarbonization not only of Naftogaz but of the whole country. No pressure, but this is definitely the goal for Naftogaz, to use this revenue to have the country decarbonize, because we don't have enough of the sources which we have from the European Union, from the taxonomies, and from other partners, except our own natural resources. And I definitely will pass the floor to Torsten to have the final remarks.
Oh, he can't. Yeah, Thorsten, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Lots of.
I'd like to really.
Yeah. Lots of very interesting remarks. Just from my side, one comment. I think what is very encouraging that we are now discussing Ukraine's, let's say, participation in this wider European context. What is Ukraine's positive role in the European energy system? And that's huge. So we have not only space and, let's say, natural resources, we have infrastructure in place. So we are now looking, we will look very closely with the gas TSO, what it takes to make part of the existing gas transmission system hydrogen ready to be able to produce all these things in the future to the premium markets of the European Union. And this will be of Ukraine compared to most other players in the market. We also have, as a major advantage, the very close regulatory regime. So whenever something is produced in Ukraine, there will be access to a market in the European Union. So you don't need to have all this double certification and all these complicated things. So if you source, let's say, green hydrogen somewhere in, I don't know, France, Germany, Sweden, whatever, and it comes from Ukraine, it will be like your own. And this is something which is rare and which we further develop. And also, it is not a burden. I mean, of course, investment is always a burden. But if you look at the reality of Ukraine, Ukrainian energy sector has been underinvested for the last 30 years. And the investment is needed. And now we have the chance to do it in a smart way. As Graham said, do it, that it's future-proof. And now we have the opportunity. And gas is a clear example of the way to go. Because the big problem in Ukraine is the coal sector for economic reasons, environmental and also climate reasons. So it is not in the long term economically viable. It needs to be subsidized. So it makes much more sense to invest these sums, not in subsidies, but in investments for modern energy technologies. And in the short run, the role of natural or fossil gas may even grow because the role of coal will diminish. But the pathway of decarbon resources for Ukraine is clearly there. We talk about biogas, we talk about green hydrogen. This is not something completely far in the future, so we can start to work on this. But I fully agree, of course, that Ukraine has not only the sustainability question, but also the affordability question, and the energy security question very prominently on the agenda. So we have always supported an increase in Ukraine's domestic gas production, which essentially should reduce export dependencies for the country and should also develop new business model for natural gas use, which would help decarbonizing not only the energy sector, but the economy as a whole. Thank you.
Well, Thorsten, I'm sorry, I kind of left you aside before because you were back up here. But I really have, I'm very interested in your perspective because I know you're so involved with Ukraine for so long, energy matters, and you have this a certain perspective from outside, from the EU. They're facing a situation now where, I mean, both Mr. Biden and Mrs. Merkel's envoys want to try and negotiate so they can continue getting like Naftogaz, the country can keep getting 40 BCM of gas into the country. Now here's the problem. I mean, it's true. Naftogaz, why not produce hydrogen? If there's a market for it, it makes no sense, why not? I don't see why discriminate between blue and gray. If they have gas, you could talk to the chair of the German Hydrogen Council, Ms. Kirsten Westphal, and she's written articles. Get over this.
And just coming back on one of the previous questions on Nord Stream 2, of course,
from the European Union, from the taxonomies, and from other partners to have.
Please.
interest to be investment is always a burden, but if you have, we talk also develop new business model for natural gas use, which would help decarbonizing not only the energy sector.
Envoys want to try and negotiate so they can continue getting like gas. The country can keep getting 40 BCM of gas into the country. Now here's the problem. I mean, it's true. Natural gas, why not produce hydrogen? If there's a market for it, it makes no sense, why not? I don't see why discriminate between blue and gray. If they have gas, you could talk to the chair of the German Hydrogen Council, Ms. Kirsten Westphal, and she's written articles. Get over this.
Start to work on this, but I fully agree, of course, that Ukraine has not only the sustainability question, but also the affordability question and the energy security question very prominently on the agenda. So we have always supported an increase in Ukraine's domestic gas production, which essentially should reduce export dependencies for the country and should also develop new business model for natural gas use, which would help decarbonizing not only the energy sector, but the economy as a whole. Thank you.
Well, Thorsten, I'm sorry, I kind of left you aside. I'd be interested in your perspective because I know you're so involved from outside. Now, boys can keep getting 40 BCM. True. Why not? I don't see why discriminate between blue and gray. If they have gas, you could talk to the chair of the German Hydrogen Council, Ms. Kirsten Westphal, and she's written articles. Get over this. From the European side, I get the feeling there's not full confidence that this is going to happen. There's problems with some people who should be ready to reverse flow and so forth. Could you speak a little bit about the interrelationship of these things?
Well, on the reverse flow, I think Olga is better placed than me to answer, because I know that in Slovakia this week to discuss exactly the physical reversing of pipeline capacity to allow the best placed person in the room to answer this. So we are fully supporting this politically. We have also made this public. So we think that the more physical interconnection we have, the better it is. And that's not only true for gas. We're also now discussing, it was 2 weeks ago, also a public event before the EU-Ukraine summit on the integration of our electricity grids. So this is a standing EU policy and we fully support this. And just coming back on one of the previous questions on Nord Stream 2, of course, and this also we have said publicly, we are firmly convinced that Nord Stream 2 has to be fully, let's say, operated in according with the gas directive from 2019, so the third energy package applies. The process is going on. The European Commission will work closely also with the German. Most likely, this will, like many other things,
but we need to move on. So thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
I ask you all to stand for? Thank you. Yulia Rybak, advisor to the Minister of Energy of Ukraine and co-head of the German